The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Illinois colleges in crisis. Why some high schoolers and their parents are being advised to attend out-of-state universities. And another massive lawsuit for police misconduct. Why Chicago has paid out more than $500 million to families and victims since 2004. Plus, the revolution in vending machines. So long, candy and chips. Hello, carrots and kale. Stay with us for those stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Robin Robinson. College-bound students are learning a valuable but tough lesson thanks to the state's budget impasse. Here's Chris Bury with more.
The state budget crisis is now having a serious impact on Illinois colleges and universities. So serious that many college-bound high school students are concentrating their searches on out-of-state universities. We visited one suburban high school to see how that dilemma is impacting students. When the bell rings at Elk Grove High School, about 2,000 students move to their next classes, flooding the hallways. Among them is 17-year-old Evan Hatfield, a senior. He has a lot to think about these days.
I've got 3 options that if things work out, I could basically get out debt-free.
Hatfield is referring to 3 colleges where he has been accepted.
Ball State, U of I Urbana-Champaign, and Drake and Des Moines.
All 3 are offering Hatfield a virtual free ride through 4 years of college. He would like to attend the University of Illinois, but he is worried about their offer.
We're worried that the scholarship money might eventually go down the drain if this budget crisis keeps going, because we don't know how long it's going to go for. Everyone thought it would be over, and yet 10 months later, here we are.
Indeed, here we are. For 9 months, Illinois has been operating without a budget as the political stalemate between Governor Rauner and House Speaker Mike Madigan drags on.
Nobody's willing to compromise, and that really, really gets me.
Hatfield and thousands of other students like him have to make a decision by May 1st about which college they will attend in the fall. Helping students make those decisions is Elk Grove High School guidance counselor Paul Genovese.
We're advising students to have a variety of schools to apply to. So included in their list of schools, some Illinois public schools, some out-of-state public schools.
Genovese has been advising college-bound students for 16 years in the state's second largest high school district.
More concerning is the parents that have current kids in college that are juniors or seniors, and their fear of a school closing and not being able to get their child to get awarded their bachelor degree.
Madeline Dubeck with the government watchdog group Reboot Illinois goes a step further. She says the budget impasse in Springfield hurts not only students, but puts the entire public university system at risk.
You're hurting all of the support staff who work at those schools. You're hurting all of the professors who work at those schools. You're hurting the ability to recruit.
Some university presidents have told Illinois lawmakers that their schools will need to make drastic cutbacks if funding is not reinstated soon. Some universities are stepping up recruitment efforts and even reducing tuition to attract more students. The president of Northeastern Illinois University sent a note to potential students reassuring them that they could count on the college to provide an exceptional environment for learning.
If it hadn't been for this budget crisis, I probably would have committed to U of I before all those other scholarship offers came in.
And now out-of-state universities have stepped up their recruitment of Illinois students. Indiana State University, for one, has targeted high school students here because of the Illinois budget deadlock. Now here's Robin with more on this and other trending stories. Robin?
Thanks, Chris. Tonight we are joined by Amara Inya, public policy consultant, Michael Coolidge, host of the syndicated radio talk show, The Michael Coolidge Show, and Marianne Ahern, political reporter for NBC5 Chicago. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. You saw that story. High school counselors actually telling students you better think about going out of state because we're not sure. Is our brand in terms of higher education being tarnished here, Marianne? Is this something that's in the top of conversation?
Absolutely, yes. Isn't this concerning? I mean, it's far beyond Chicago State, which is so concerning of what's going to happen there. They're closing school early this semester. And then now students trying to figure out what to do. It's going to be a brain drain on the state if students leave here to head to other places where they're assured that they will receive the money they've been told they're going to get.
What, Michael, you think? Is this as serious as are we making a big deal of nothing?
It is. I mean, the budget impasse is a real thing, and it's affecting a lot of the state. You know, people at the lower end of the economic scale, I know, and other areas are not getting paid for things. So I don't know. This might be an opportunity for some of these schools to cut costs at the top, to maybe cut tuition. Other states, other university presidents, Mitch Daniels, I know, in Purdue University has been really successful at cutting the costs at the non-teaching positions at schools. Maybe this is an opportunity.
The state has cut funding to higher education. Our state budget 5.7% goes to higher education. That's about half the national average. They've raised tuition to make up the difference. So I'm not sure how many more opportunities we have to, you know, cut costs and how does that affect our accreditation? You know, you can't, when you get to the bone.
And it puts the families in an even more difficult position because even if they're going to out-of-state schools, you still have to pay out-of-state tuition. So either way, they're either going to have the uncertainty of being in an Illinois school, or if they go out-of-state, that's still very expensive for Illinois students. Well,
there have been cases where neighboring states have started offering in-state tuition prices to, like, Arizona to California, and we wouldn't put that past Indiana now, would we?
But I've heard too, I have a lot of friends with college students out of state, and they made these decisions years ago before the budget impasse because average-wise, the state schools in Illinois are a little bit higher tuition than a lot of the private schools in a lot of other states. So I still think that there's some ways that we can cut.
But if I'm a parent and I'm looking at the long-term costs for 4 years, and you have a guarantee of perhaps an Indiana state tuition that is going to be less or comparable, or are you going to go with something that here in Illinois that you're so unsure of, you might lean towards the Indiana state.
Even if it was the same price, you're looking at what the long-term viability is.
Right.
So Chicago State University has kind of risen to the forefront of this battle over funding for universities, state universities, because some other things, the social services you talked about, there have been court orders and special bills to kind of fund those, but the universities have kind of been left to their own devices. And recently it seemed that the Chicago State came out front and said, you know, we're going to have to close. We don't have the money for this. And then the governor's office kind of shot back at Chicago State in what many people think is kind of a picking on of this historically black college.
I care very much about the students at Chicago State. They are being failed by Chicago State University. They have the widest achievement gap between white students and African American students of any college. That is wrong. They are failing, and we're not going to tolerate that kind of failure.
Anybody want to comment on that achievement gap?
I think he's diverting from the real issue. This has nothing to do with the level of funding that the state should be receiving, and the fact that the budget stalemate is the reason why, or a large reason why, Chicago State is in peril right now. I think he's deflecting to the achievement gap, but that's not the central issue in this case.
Well, there are some who've attacked his facts on the achievement gap because he says, you know, the white students are graduating at an 85% rate, but there's only 6 of them in the pool of numbers that he's referring to,
right.
Whereas Chicago State does graduate 1 out of every 2 African Americans who graduate from a state university in Illinois comes from Chicago State.
And I think he is looking back at some of the years that there were some troubles with how it was managed at Chicago State. They have new leadership there. I don't
Very
know
recently.
Yes. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to keep attacking for problems that happened in the past if they are doing a turnaround or they're in the midst of it trying to.
Well, turnaround is what you think needs to be done overall. I'm thinking,
a little bit,
Michael.
but I kind of agree with Amara to the extent that he was deflecting a little bit from the issue there. But I'd like to see, you know, Speaker of the House Michael Madigan's thoughts on this too. This isn't a Governor Rauner versus Chicago State issue. This is a funding issue and a budget impasse in Springfield that, you know, we saw the earlier story where the students said no one seems to be compromising. Actually, Governor Rauner has tried to compromise a lot with the Democrats in Springfield and hasn't had a whole lot coming back on the other side of the table.
For example, I mean, just what's he willing to give? I mean, we'd love to help him
He's
negotiate.
actually said that he would consider raising taxes, which would not be liked by a lot of people in Illinois, if Speaker Madigan would perhaps do tort reform, perhaps do some workers' comp reform. Some of the things that he ran on compromises that way, and they've been completely silent, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate for that
Some
matter.
of those are pretty unrealistic, though. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I get it that he's saying, yes, you know, I'm willing to give you this, but I want my laundry list of 3 or 4 things. You know,
Even some of them.
But they're not small things. I mean, when you talk about workers' comp reform, and many argue that workers' comp reform is already in place and has shown results in Illinois, and many people say read union busting. They translate that to that.
But the idea behind that is you would attract more businesses, which would mean more jobs, which would mean more taxpayers paying revenue to the state, and not having to raise taxes to make that happen.
Do you think that the voters of Illinois signed on for this? That they said
voted
we want?
Yes, they voted for Governor Rauner.
But did
2
they
years
expect
ago.
to see 9 months without a budget?
No.
They voted for change. They voted out of frustration, which is understandable because we have had Democratic leadership for decades, and the problems that we're facing now did not just pop up overnight. But I don't think that they voted for the stalemate. I don't think that they voted for what essentially appears to many people of Illinois to be an ego match or who's going to blink first between the leadership in our state government. We didn't sign up for that.
And in October, Governor Rauner said he expected they'd have a budget deal in 30 to 90 days. Obviously, that has not happened. Any predictions from you
would
all?
think this is really a key time right now.
Well, we're 9 months in.
The primary's over with. We know now who's on the ticket in November. You've got a couple of lame ducks that maybe they would go your way, whoever is trying to lure them. So if you're going to get a compromise, perhaps now, but it doesn't appear that way. I think we're going to have to wait all the way until after November.
Well, then we'll be into a second budget we
I
won't
know,
have.
right? What's going to
people
happen
are
to
going
the
to start running
schools?
for governor by then, too.
That's true. That's true.
Well, they already are.
Yes, they already are. So, related to the money and fiscal problems that the state has, which of course Chicago is, one of the biggest economic engines in the state and the neediest, it might be said. It's part of the bargaining chip that the governor won't move on. School funding reform or helping CPS until he also gets some of the concessions or compromises he wants in Springfield. Yet we have $660 million to spend on police misconduct payouts since 2004. It's a staggering number, not just costing taxpayers, but it's costing us our confidence, I think, in the system. Could you ever have imagined that this would just be, sign off on this check, sign off on that check?
No, and in my career as a reporter, it reminds me so much of the priest abuse. Unfortunately, that's been still in the headlines as well. Writing a check and not the reform. Now, there are some things that are going to change. We have a new superintendent, and we're going to have body cams, and that might help fight some of this problem. But these aren't the only case. There are still cases in line waiting to be settled.
Waiting to be settled.
Yeah,
The latest case this week, Phillipcoleman, who was dragged from his cell and tasered repeatedly and ultimately died. That settlement is reported to be about $4.9 million. Laquan McDonald, $5 million. I guess we've put the price on a life at about $5 million is what it is in Chicago. But at what point does the price become so much that taxpayers demand something more than payouts?
Well, we have. I mean, I think we for far too long, the city has been conveniently writing checks, but without the reforms necessary. We've had study after study that was published, and it sat on the shelf. So now we've reached the point because of our fiscal crisis where there's real attention to the sheer amount of dollars that we're paying because of an unwillingness to change policies at the very top, from the 5th floor, really, because that influences public safety policy. And this latest payout, I think, is just further example of that.
It's such an odd thing. Is there some sort of equation for this? Like, it's such an awful tragedy, Phillipcoleman's death, but would $49 million
would that be
bring
better?
it back?
Yeah.
Would $490 million? Like, why $4.9 million?
Well,
and are we setting this standard now, and it seems like we are, for any sort of death where that money could be used on reforms or education or something?
It could be used to things that might prevent some of the violence, either
well, the
police or...
Alderman Sawyer said that they were trying to find the balance between what taxpayers would be willing to pay, so it's not too expensive for taxpayers and the families'
and being
interest.
fair to the families.
But again, it seems to me quite arbitrary. I think they're just going, the Laquan McDonald case perhaps set a precedent, and so they don't want to veer too far from that. So,
but Alderman Sawyer also said that these payouts aren't what will make a change. It is prosecuting and sentencing those responsible. Yet each of these cases was found by the Independent Police Review Board to have been justified, or to have found no wrongdoing. What good is that board? They can't even pick a police superintendent, apparently, not to the confidence of the mayor.
But the police board has to be so frustrated by that, to have had this process of 4 months vetting the candidates, you know, coming up with 3 finalists, although one of the finalists is now, we find out, has been a part of an internal investigation for perhaps, allegedly, helping black officers score well on the lieutenant exam. So you say, wait a second, how did that happen? How did he get through the process?
One of the finalists and also an associate of the ultimate choice.
Right.
But that's just an accusation, and we'll look for more information on that. But another one of the finalists actually said he was offered the job, and then it was rescinded, and then the mayor said that's not true, which means somebody's not telling the truth. And I would hate to think it was one of the finalists that the board chose.
I find it very hard to believe. I spoke to him many, many times, and he was offered the job.
But nonetheless, if you're $660 billion since 2004, it would seem that radical change might be in the works. Alderman Hairston has proposed, let's just do away with this board and do another more citizen focused board.
You also have the CPAC, which is going for citizen accountability. So they want to completely abolish the system of hierarchy in place and put citizens in charge of the police. You have another ordinance that was proposed by the Community Renewal Society. They're calling for an independent monitor, a little bit different from what Alderman Hairston was proposing, to come in and take over what IPRA was doing. So there are some more radical proposals. I think the question is, what reforms is IPRA doing now under their new leadership, and then how do you balance that with some of the more radical suggestions that are coming in?
And I got to ask, Michael, do you think you can legislate or regulate this problem? It seems to be more a body cam doesn't make me like someone better. It doesn't make me respect them more. It seems like there's something in the hearts and minds here between the community and the police on both sides that needs to change.
I was just having a discussion with someone in the green room who I know In the Loop's going to do a story on later about the need for police officers to be involved in the communities more and to have people in the community know the police officers more, so they're familiar with them. So the immediate reaction to hearing a police officer's name or police in general isn't this negative one.
And fear.
And vice versa. Police shouldn't think about going to a particular neighborhood and saying this is going to be a really bad situation. Let's start on a positive foot and try to prevent these awful things from happening.
Well, and the recruitment that has just been done for the next class to take the exam, really an outreach through the community to make sure that the officers look more like the community.
Even though activists will tell you that just because an officer is black doesn't mean you can necessarily expect a better experience. So it's about humanizing one another. There's a person behind that badge. You know, there's a child behind that, angry-looking 15-year-old. So,
I think that's the key word, is to humanize, and also the culture within the department. It has to reflect that humanization. A lot of the frustrations are the fact that when things have been uncovered, there's been such a lack of accountability, no process, no transparency, and so the community largely is feeling that they've been sort of brushed to the side. So now it's come to the forefront.
I talk about a lot of controversial issues on my radio show that don't have meeting in the middle on. Abortion, for example, some people you're just not going to convince on.
Polarizing
I feel
things.
like this does have a solution. This issue does have a positive solution that leads to less crime, more trust between communities and police officers, and we're slowly but surely getting there, I think.
Of course,
Very slowly.
And more trust does lead to less crime. There are some who said that police being under the spotlight right now has caused them to, as one person put it months ago, kind of curl up into the fetal position and not be as proactive as they have been. Big spike in violence in the first quarter of this year. We're on track to kill the statistics, excuse the pun. But in response to that, the Cook County Board is considering a 4-cent additional gas tax to go to anti-violence programs, not jobs for youth, which have black youth particularly have an astronomical unemployment rate, but also for the disabled. There's something there for everybody. There's more police, which some people don't want, but sheriffs coming into the neighborhoods. Does that have a chance that would bring our county gas tax up to about 10 cents per gallon?
I would think that they better hurry up and do it before the state and the city does the same idea.
Everybody's going to go for the gas.
Of course they are when the gas prices are this low. I kind of wonder if there may be a compromise, a meeting in the middle.
Not quite 4 cents.
Right.
Mike, you are shaking your head.
I just think this is such a bad idea. I think that you can't the problem is real. Youth unemployment, youth violence. The part of the thing that I think would fix this would be not so much emphasis on raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I know it's not a huge issue here in Chicago, but it is in a lot of other cities. Those are entry-level small business jobs where youth get great opportunities to work. How about, rather than creating out of whole cloth a job program of cleaning an empty lot somewhere, make a business climate here where lower wage, entry-level jobs are more apparent. I worked in ice cream and delivering pizzas for 4 years.
Grown people are doing those jobs now because because the unemployment level among them is so high. You know, the paper boy's not a boy anymore. So I agree that if a young person doesn't have to make $15 an hour, and I've talked to them, they'd be happy making 10. But a grown person is who's doing those jobs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier said than done. I mean, the business climate, at least in the city of Chicago, has been, you know, there have been some challenges, especially in some of those challenged neighborhoods where unemployment, so for example, in my neighborhood, is around 67% for African-American males between 16 and 24. So there does need to be an immediate solution. I think they will have to meet somewhere in the middle. I mean, when you implement these taxes, the thing is, they never disappear.
Right.
And so next year we'll do another 4-cent tax on the cloud or on some other service that really taxpayers are already paying for, and that's my concern.
$50 million is what this is supposed to raise, this 4-cent tax, and it's not just going to be paid for by people in Cook County.
Anybody who drives through and gets gas.
I don't live in Cook County anymore, and I drive to Chicago all the time. I'll be paying for that. It's the highest area of the whole country many times is the Chicago area, and so much of it has to do with these taxes, and you wonder where this money's going, and I just don't, I think it's a solution to a real problem, but it's the wrong solution.
So if they could raise $50 million even through this tax, what would you put that $50 million to?
Back to the people, back to the community where entrepreneurs can start businesses and hire many of these kids.
And hire some people. So it's it works out to, they say, about $28 per year for the average motorist buying gas. And I think if people were confident that that was going to make a big difference, that they wouldn't begrudge that $28. But there have been some problems in the past with the way some of these things are administered.
And we should call into attention the $50 million that the mayor raised, I believe it was a couple of years ago, to address anti-violence programs as well. So the question is, with that money that was raised...
was that next Chicago or
exactly,
Get in Chicago? I can't lost track.
Questions around how that funding has been used and how effective it's been. Seeing the spike in violence, how effective was that $50 million?
Right. Governor Quinn is also facing his own questions over a program that he had that seemed to be more of a campaign fund than it was jobs. But I do still come back to, you have to have some kind of concrete solution. You can't just say, boy, I wish we could hire everyone. Here's one way to fund a program. If there's some kind of safeguards, I'm not sure how you get those.
You got to have some transparency, accountability. Tom Dart's thinking it's a good idea. He comes with a little more credibility than most elected officials. He supports this idea.
And who would like to run for mayor as well? So he's got.
They've been saying that for years. I'm not sure how they've kept him from doing that.
I think it's this time you might see him.
Okay. Well, you know, they're not going to agree on everything, and it goes right down to our leisure activities. Sox and Cubs is the best part of the season for baseball fans in Chicago because everything is possible. Sox and Cubs, you know, as of midweek, you know, just after the start of the season, both, you know, #2 in their divisions. I personally, I'm sure you can't tell which team I root for.
On your outfit? Yeah.
Okay, on my outfit. Okay, I wore this on purpose. But seriously, this is something that the city can really rally around. It's also a great economic mover. Your thoughts? Are we going to?
Right. Bring your parka this week, though. I think.
Yes, I know. But it's also something that used to be a little polarizing. But now people generally say, I'm a Sox fan, but I like the Cubs too. What about you?
I'm excited. I drove by yesterday actually as they were hanging the marquee for the Cubs Stadium.
At Wrigley Field.
And people were outside snapping pictures, and it was really exciting. And I think it's one of the bright spots that can really bring the city together, whether you're a South Sider or a North Sider.
Yeah, not to rain on anyone's parade, but I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed when they go to Wrigley Field for the first time next year and not see the McDonald's across the street. It's torn down. It's been there since 1980.
Yeah, it was an old McDonald's.
Yes, but right across the street, a cheaper way to eat with families and stuff before you go into the park. Not going to have that option anymore.
And the Starbucks is gone as well.
Oh, well, they're probably going to still be selling their own lattes inside.
Yeah.
But, so the focus on the Cubs seems to be always about their ballpark. On the Sox, it always seems to be about their locker room and their family issues.
This year, right. But also the Sox has great food, so you never have a bad time.
Great with food.
And parking and family friendly. But I'm showing my bias. I don't want to do that. So right now,
maybe they'll play each other in the World Series and everyone will be happy.
That is our continuous fantasy.
Yeah.
All right, we'll need that if the Bulls don't pull out this last playoff spot. Thanks very much to our guests, Amara Inya, Michael Coolidge, and Marianne Ahern. For a nation struggling with obesity, most vending machines are still a danger zone of sugar and fat. Chris Bury reports on how a Chicago business is cashing in on convenience without the calories.
For Chicagoans in a hurry, healthy eating options are getting better as chains featuring salads and fresh food move into the market. But vending machines still stocked with candy, chips, and other calorie-heavy snacks are the final frontier. One Chicagoan is trying his best to change that and grow a business along the way. In a world where people can easily grab junk food from vending machines, Farmer's Fridge is working to give consumers healthier food choices. Luke Saunders, a former salesman, frequently traveled to places where fresh, healthy food was not available. He knew there was a market for those like him, people on the go but starving for healthy, convenient food. So Saunders quit his job and started on a new journey.
Farmer's Fridge is a platform where we use automated fridges around the city of Chicago. We fill them with fresh, healthy food every single day. I think for healthy eating right now, people want to eat it, they know they need it, and entrepreneurs like me are basically catching up to the market.
In this nondescript building on Chicago's west side, Saunders has come up with a recipe that's been working since he launched his business in 2013. Each day, his staff of 35 people prep, cook, assemble, deliver, and stock nearly 40 fridges he's stationed around the city and suburbs. Saunders and his team pride themselves on offering fresh salads with produce grown mostly by local farmers.
We actually have to hand shave these to keep it consistent and to get them this thin. So a perfect radish, I should be able to hold it up to the light and actually see through it a little bit. And so this is something she actually hand adjusts that, and then we do everything like that. There's no compromising. The menu itself for Farmer's Fridge consists of 8 to 9 salads. We have rotating menu options. So for example, every month we have something called the jar du jour, and that's just something, it's whatever seasonal. We have 8 snacks. We have protein options like chicken, tofu. We'll have some desserts like a chia pudding or some chocolate trail mix, and then actually we just added fresh juices.
One of the fridges is located in this 7-Eleven store on Wacker Drive in downtown Chicago.
When I started working in this building, I think I got one the first day because I thought it was the coolest thing.
Customers are definitely looking for better options to fill in for their meals or for their snacks, and this really fills in that gap for them.
And filling in that gap is how Saunders hopes he can build his business.
I see this long term as the goal to be, let's make a fresh, delicious salad as accessible as a Coca-Cola.
And Farmer's Fridge is now in about 20 locations throughout the city of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. Because the salads are prepared daily, unsold items are then donated to local shelters and food banks.
Great model. I'd like to have one follow my children around. That concludes tonight's show. You are now in the loop. If you'd like to find out more about our program, we invite you to log on to WYCC.org. Click on In the Loop. Until next time, I'm Robin Robinson.
And I'm Chris Bury. Good night.